I was forced to sit alone at my sister's wedding. Then Karma walked in wearing a suit. Welcome back with a new real shock story. Before we start, comment and tell me which city you're watching from. At the end, don't forget to subscribe and rate it from 0 to 10. Let's enjoy the story, everyone.
I still remember that day as if it happened yesterday, the day my sister got married. People say weddings are supposed to bring families together, but for me, that day tore everything apart. From the moment I opened my eyes that morning, something in the air felt strange. The house smelled like flowers and perfume, and new beginnings. But underneath it all, I could feel something heavy, something I couldn't name. I told myself I was just nervous. After all, it was my sister's big day, and I wanted everything to be perfect for her. We'd spent months planning this wedding together. Every little detail, every ribbon, every piece of decor, I helped choose it. I was proud of her. I really was. She was the golden one in our family. Beautiful, confident, the one everyone loved without question. Me, I was just there, quiet, dependable, the one who helped behind the scenes. I didn't need the spotlight. I just wanted to see her happy. That's what sisters do, right? But that morning, as I walked into the venue, the first chill hit me. Eyes followed me, not warmly, not with excitement, but with something colder. I brushed it off, smiled politely, and kept walking. Maybe they were just busy, distracted. Maybe it was all in my head. When I reached the front where the family was seated, I stopped. My name card wasn't there. I checked again, first one table, then another. Still nothing. A woman in a headset came up to me and smiled in that practiced, polite way. "Oh, Miss Rose," she said softly, "your seat is over there." She pointed toward the back, far from the family, behind a tall pillar near the exit. I froze for a second, thinking it had to be a mistake. Maybe someone just misplaced my card. But no, that was my seat. Alone. I could feel the heat rise in my face as I walked toward it. The sound of laughter from the main table felt like it was echoing louder than before. I tried to smile, tried to pretend it didn't hurt, but my chest ached. I told myself, "It's fine, Alic, maybe there's a reason. Don't make a scene." But deep down, something cracked. When the ceremony began, everyone's attention was on her, my sister, the bride. Walking down the aisle in her shining white gown, she was breathtaking. I wanted to cry, but not from joy. When her eyes swept across the crowd, I waited for them to meet mine, but they didn't. She looked past me like I wasn't even there. I tried to tell myself I was imagining it. Maybe she didn't see me. Maybe I was But as the vows went on, and the crowd clapped, I saw the truth in every glance, every whisper. They weren't looking at me with confusion. They were looking with judgment. When dinner started, I could barely eat. I watched from my lonely table as people raised their glasses and toasted, laughing, celebrating. Every time someone said family, I felt another sting. I'd never felt so invisible. Then, the speeches began. My uncle spoke about love, my mother about pride. Everyone clapped, everyone smiled except when my name came up. The groom's best man made a joke about me. I couldn't hear it clearly, but the laughter that followed was cruel enough to tell me what it was. I laughed too, weakly, pretending it didn't hurt, but inside, I felt myself shrinking. Then, as I sat there trying to hold back tears, one of my relatives, someone I used to be close to, walked by my table. She leaned in and whispered just loud enough for me to hear, "You should have known better than to show up after what you did." My heart stopped. What I did, before I could even ask what she meant, she was gone, smiling, waving at someone else like nothing had happened. I sat there frozen. What had they been told? What story was going around about me? I racked my brain, but nothing made sense. I hadn't done anything wrong. I hadn't hurt anyone. So why was everyone treating me like I was some kind of disgrace? That question clawed at me through every toast, every dance, every fake smile. I wanted to leave, but something deep inside told me to stay. Maybe I needed to see how far this would go. Maybe I was waiting for someone, anyone, to stand up for me. But no one did. Not my parents, not my sister, not one person. And then, just when I thought I couldn't take another second of pretending, it happened. The room fell silent. I didn't know why at first. The music stopped mid-beat, the chatter died out, and everyone turned toward the door. A man had walked in, tall, composed, dressed in a dark suit. His presence was calm, but it carried weight. Everyone knew him. You could see it in their faces. Surprise, shock, guilt. My sister's smile vanished instantly. The groom's face turned pale. I stared at him, not breathing. It was someone I hadn't seen in months, someone who had once been my closest friend, and the reason everything had changed, that was the moment. I knew something was about to happen, something big, something that none of them were ready for, and deep down, even though I didn't understand it yet, I knew Karma had just walked through that door. When he walked in, the whole room changed. It's hard to explain, but the energy, the laughter, the music, even the clinking of glasses just froze mid-air. Everyone turned toward him, and for a moment, it felt like time stopped. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. His presence alone said everything. I could see my sister's face drain of color, her hand clutching her bouquet a little too tight. The groom tried to smile, but his eyes darted toward the exits like he was already thinking of a way out. And me, I couldn't breathe. I hadn't seen him in months, not since everything went wrong, since the rumors started, since my family decided I wasn't one of them anymore. He had been my friend, maybe more than that, the only person who really saw me when everyone else just looked through me. He walked right past the guests, calm and collected, until he reached the center of the room. You could have heard a pin drop. Then, in the quietest voice, he said, "Before you all continue celebrating love, maybe you should hear what real love looks like." My heart skipped a beat. He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. I knew that envelope. I recognized the folded corners, the faint smudge on the top. It was mine. My letter, the one I wrote months ago in the middle of the night, when I felt like my world was collapsing. He opened it carefully, unfolded the paper, and began to read. At first, his voice was steady, calm, but as the words filled the hall, I saw the expressions change, my mother's eyes widening, my aunt's mouth dropping open, my sister shaking her head in disbelief. Every word he read was a piece of my truth, how I'd been blamed for something I didn't do, how my sister had twisted the story to protect her reputation, how I was left out, cast aside, and treated like I was a stain on the family name. It was all there, every pain, every tear, every sleepless night, and the best part, it wasn't angry, it wasn't vengeful, it was honest. When he finished, he looked up at everyone and said quietly, "That's what she wrote before you all turned your backs on her." Silence, thick, suffocating silence. No one dared to move. Then someone gasped. My sister dropped her bouquet, the petals scattering across the floor like broken pieces of the perfect image she'd built. My mother covered her mouth, whispering my name like she was only just realizing what she'd done. And me, I just sat there, my heart pounding, my hands shaking. For the first time in months, I felt seen. I didn't know what to do next. Every heartbeat felt louder than the last, echoing in my ears. The truth was finally out there, naked and raw, hanging in the air between us. For months, I'd been treated like a shadow. Now, for the first time, they couldn't pretend anymore. My sister took a shaky step forward, her voice trembling. "Alic, I didn't mean for things to go that far. You have to understand," but I couldn't, not yet. Her words sounded distant, almost hollow. My chest was too tight, my throat too dry. I looked at her and saw someone I didn't recognize anymore. The guests stood frozen, unsure whether to stay or slip quietly out. Some looked embarrassed, others guilty. The groom shifted uncomfortably beside her, rubbing his temples as if the truth itself was giving him a headache. I finally stood up. My legs felt weak, but my voice was steady. "All I ever wanted was to be happy for you," I said quietly, my words trembling but clear. "But you didn't just take that away from me. You made everyone believe I was something I'm not." She shook her head, tears glistening in her eyes. "I was scared, Alic. People were talking. I thought if I said something first, it would all go away." I almost laughed because isn't that what people always do? They hurt you to protect their own peace, not realizing they're tearing someone else apart in the process. My mother tried to step between us, her hands shaking. "Please, not here, not tonight." But it was too late for that. The truth had already entered the room, and there was no turning it back. The man in the suit, the one who had read my letter, watched silently. He didn't gloat. He didn't smile. He just looked at me with quiet reassurance, like he was saying, "You did nothing wrong." I turned to the crowd, my voice steadier now. "You all believed lies because it was easier than asking for the truth, because it made you comfortable. But that comfort came at my expense." No one said a word. For a moment, I felt the tears sting my eyes, but I blinked them away. I had cried enough. I took one last look at my sister standing in her perfect white dress, surrounded by the wreckage of her own choices, Anne said softly, I hope one day you learn what real love looks like, because it's not built on lies. Then I walked past her, through the silence, past the petals on the floor and the stairs that suddenly didn't matter anymore. When I stepped outside, the air hit me cold, sharp, but freeing. The night sky stretched wide above me, and for the first time in so long, I felt like I could breathe again. The cold night air hit my face, and it felt like the first real breath I'd taken in months. I remember just standing there for a moment, staring at the glowing windows of the hall. Inside, the music had stopped. No laughter, no chatter, just silence. The kind of silence that comes right after a truth no one can ignore anymore. I walked down the path lined with fairy lights. The sound of my heels crunching against the gravel. Each step felt like a release, like I was finally walking away from a version of myself that had spent too long trying to be accepted by people who never truly saw me. For the first few minutes, I didn't cry. I didn't even think. I just let the night wrap around me, letting it carry away the noise, the judgment, the whispers. I'd always imagined that getting justice, that seeing the truth come out, would feel triumphant. But it didn't. It felt quiet, heavy, real. My phone buzzed. It was a message from my mother. Just 2 words. Come home. I didn't reply. Not yet. The man in the suit, my friend, walked out a few moments later. His steps were calm, like he'd expected everything that happened inside. For a while, we didn't speak. He just stood beside me, hands in his pockets, looking up at the night sky. Finally, he said, You didn't deserve any of that. I turned to him, the words catching in my throat, but it happened anyway. He nodded, quiet for a long time before saying, People can't face the truth because it reminds them of what they've done to others. His voice was steady, but I could hear the sadness underneath. He wasn't just talking about them, he was talking about himself, too, about how lies and silence can destroy more than one person at a time. For the first time that night, I smiled, faintly. Thank you, I whispered. He shook his head. Don't thank me. You did the hardest part. You stayed. Those words stayed with me. You stayed, because he was right. I could have walked away at any point, but I didn't. I stayed. I faced them. And even though it broke me open, it also freed me. I looked at the glowing windows one last time. The faint shadow of my sister still visible inside. Part of me wanted to hate her, but another part couldn't. I think that's what love does. It makes forgiveness possible, even when the wound is still fresh. So I whispered a quiet goodbye, not to her, but to the person I used to be before that night, and walked into the darkness, finally, unafraid of it. The next morning felt unreal. I woke up in my tiny apartment with swollen eyes, and a silence that rang louder than any argument ever could. My phone was full of missed calls, my mother, my aunt, even my sister. For a moment, I just stared at the screen, feeling that strange mix of anger and ache that doesn't quite have a name. When I finally listened to one of the voicemails, it was my sister's voice, small, trembling, and not nearly as confident as she had been the night before. Alic, I didn't know he would say those things. I didn't mean for it to go that far. Please, call me. I sat there for a long time, replaying that message. I wanted to believe her. I really did, but words were easy. Actions had been louder. The man in the suit, his name was Daniel, had texted too. You okay? I typed, trying to be, then deleted it, then typed it again, then just hit send. The rest of that day, I stayed by the window, watching the city move as if nothing had happened. Cars honked, kids laughed, the world kept spinning, completely unaware that mine had stopped for a while. By evening, I finally went out for a walk. The autumn air had that cool bite that feels half alive, half lonely. Every sound, the rustle of leaves, the distant hum of traffic, felt sharper, more vivid. I wasn't numb anymore. I was awake. And for the first time in a long time, I started thinking about what I wanted, not what everyone else expected. My whole life, I'd been the quiet one, the understanding one, the one who didn't cause problems. But that night at the wedding changed something in me. It showed me how silence could turn into a prison, how trying to keep the peace could destroy your own. When I reached the small park near my street, I sat on a bench and just let everything out. The tears, the anger, the confusion. It wasn't graceful. It wasn't pretty, but it was real. A woman walking her dog passed by and gave me a gentle smile. One of those wordless, human things that remind you you're not invisible. It sounds small, but it meant everything in that moment. Later that week, I went back to work. People noticed something different in me. I smiled less, but my eyes, they said more. I had stopped pretending, that my sister sent a letter eventually. Not a text, not a call, a real letter. Inside, she apologized. But not just for what happened. She said she finally understood how long I'd been made to feel like an outsider in my own family. Reading her words, I cried, but not out of sadness. It was something closer to release. That night, I stood by the window again, looking out at the city lights, and whispered, maybe this was how I was meant to find myself, by losing everything that wasn't real. Morning light poured through the curtains, soft and gold, painting my apartment walls like a quiet promise. For the first time in months, I didn't wake up with that heavy feeling in my chest. Something inside me had shifted. I wasn't completely healed, but I wasn't broken anymore, either. I made coffee and sat by the window, notebook in hand. I started writing just words, fragments, feelings I hadn't let myself say out loud. At first, it was messy. Anger, confusion, shame. But as the pages filled, the tone changed. The more I wrote, the more I realized that what happened at that wedding wasn't just an ending. It was the beginning of me learning how to stand alone, unapologetically. That afternoon, I met Daniel at a small cafe downtown. He looked tired but peaceful, the kind of look that comes after facing something painful, and still choosing to stay kind. You look different, he said. I feel different, I answered, stirring my coffee. Lighter, maybe, he nodded, understanding. We talked for hours, not about the wedding, not about what they said, but about everything else. Music, books, plans, dreams. For once, I wasn't defined by what I'd been through. I was just me. As the days turned into weeks, I started noticing small signs of strength in my everyday life. The way I spoke up at work when someone tried to interrupt me. The way I smiled at strangers, instead of keeping my head down. The way I stopped apologizing for existing. One evening, my phone buzzed again. It was my mother. This time, her voice sounded older, softer. Alic, can you come by? Just dinner. No talk about the wedding. I hesitated but agreed. When I walked into the house, it smelled like it used to when I was little. Garlic bread and laughter. My sister was there, too, sitting quietly, her hands folded. Dinner was slow, careful, but not cruel. No one pretended nothing happened, but no one tried to rewrite it either. It was just human, imperfect, real. At one point, my mother reached across the table and said, "You've grown strong, Alic. I'm proud of you." Those words hit deeper than I expected. For years, I had been chasing that approval, and now that I had it, I realized I didn't need it anymore. But hearing it still mattered. It was closure. The kind that doesn't erase pain, but makes peace with it. When I left that night, the air felt warmer, gentler somehow. I wasn't walking away from my family anymore. I was walking toward myself. In the days that followed, I couldn't stop thinking about that dinner. Not because it fixed everything, but because it showed me something I'd never seen before. Healing doesn't come in one big moment. It comes in small, uneven steps. A message, a conversation, a breath that doesn't hurt anymore. I started taking long evening walks again, down the same streets I used to rush through without noticing. The world looked different now. Maybe it was me who had changed the way I saw things, the way I allowed myself to feel them. Even the silence felt softer, no longer heavy with shame but filled with possibility. One evening, I stopped by a community center near my apartment. They were hosting an open mic night, a small, cozy room with string lights and mismatched chairs. I almost walked past it, but something inside me said, "Go in." I sat in the back, listening as people stood up and shared their stories. Stories about loss, fear, love, second chances. Every voice shook a little, but every word felt honest. When the host asked if anyone else wanted to share, my heart started pounding. I didn't plan to. I really didn't. But then I thought, if I could survive that night at the wedding, I could survive this. When I stood up, my hands trembled. I didn't have a script, just truth. I told them about the moment I realized that being alone wasn't the same as being lonely. About how I'd spent years shrinking myself to fit into spaces that were never meant for me. About how one night, in the middle of heartbreak, I finally saw myself clearly. The room was silent, no pity, no judgment, just stillness, the kind that holds you rather than suffocates you. When I finished, someone in the front row whispered, "Thank you." And that was enough. After that night, I kept going back, not because I needed to tell more, but because I wanted to listen, to be reminded that everyone is fighting to find their voice, their peace, their version of freedom. Somewhere along the way, I realized I wasn't that girl sitting alone at a table anymore. I wasn't waiting to be chosen, or seen, or saved. I was building something entirely my own. A life that didn't depend on anyone else's approval. One night, walking home under the soft city glow, I caught my reflection in a shop window. For a moment, I didn't recognize the woman looking back. She looked steady, quietly powerful, whole, and I smiled because for the first time, I finally believed her. That night, as I walked home, something inside me felt quiet but strong, like the soft hum of a heartbeat after a storm. The city lights shimmered off the wet pavement, and I thought about everything that had led me here. Every moment of humiliation, every tear, every small act of courage I didn't even realize I was making. It all added up to this, a quiet kind of freedom. I used to think strength meant not feeling anything, keeping my chin up, swallowing the pain, pretending I was fine, but real strength, I learned, is the opposite. It's letting yourself break open and still choosing to keep going. It's standing in the wreckage of what you thought you needed and saying, I'm still here. I started sharing my story online, not the polished version, but the real one. I talked about family, betrayal, self-worth, forgiveness, and something unexpected happened. People began to write back, messages from strangers across the world. Your story sounds like mine. Thank you for saying what I couldn't. You made me feel less alone. Reading those words, I realized my pain hadn't been for nothing. It had become a bridge, connecting me to people I'd never met, showing me that even in the darkest moments, we're never truly alone. Sometimes, I still think about that wedding night, the music, the stares, the way my hands shook as I sat at that lonely table. For a long time, that memory used to haunt me, but now, when I see it in my mind, it feels different. That girl sitting alone, she wasn't weak, she was waiting to be reborn. A few weeks later, my sister called again. Her voice sounded clearer, lighter somehow. She said, Alic, I want to thank you. You made me see things I didn't want to see. I didn't know what to say at first. Part of me was still afraid to trust her. But then I realized that forgiving her didn't mean forgetting. It meant freeing myself from the weight of it. So I said, thank you for saying that. And for once, it felt enough. That night, I wrote one last line in my journal. Sometimes, the people who break you are also the ones who teach you how strong you really are. I closed the notebook, feeling something shift again, not a big, dramatic change, but a quiet, permanent one, the kind that stays with you, even when no one's watching. Weeks passed, and life found its rhythm again. The chaos had quieted, but the lessons stayed. Every morning when I opened my eyes, I felt a calm I'd never known before, the kind that comes when you finally stop running from yourself. Sometimes, I'd still pass the wedding hall on my way to work. The decorations were gone, the lights dark. Just another building now. But each time I looked at it, I smiled, not with bitterness, but with understanding. That night didn't ruin me. It revealed me. It showed me what I was made of. I thought about how many people live their whole lives trying to be enough for someone else, a family, a partner, a world that keeps changing the rules. And I thought about how freeing it felt to finally say, I don't owe anyone an apology for who I am. The hurt didn't disappear overnight. Healing is never tidy. Some days I still woke up with old thoughts, wondering if I could have handled things differently. But then I'd remember, I did what I could with what I knew, and now I know better. One evening, I recorded a short video for my followers, just me, my voice, and the truth. I used to think being alone meant I'd lost, I said, but being alone taught me that peace isn't about who sits beside you. It's about who you become when the noise fades. The comments came pouring in, hundreds of them. People saying they felt seen, that they'd been through something similar, that maybe now they had the courage to speak to. That's when I understood the story wasn't just mine anymore. It belonged to everyone who had ever been made to feel small and still chose to rise. Now, when I think of that night, of the empty chair, the whispers, the man in the dark suit who reminded me that I mattered, I don't feel pain, I feel gratitude. Because sometimes karma doesn't come to punish, it comes to balance, to remind you that the truth always finds its way, even when no one believes you. And maybe that's what life is, a collection of moments where we fall apart just enough to rebuild ourselves stronger. So if you're listening to this, wherever you are, remember this. Being left out doesn't mean you don't belong. Sometimes it just means you're being redirected toward the place you were always meant to stand. Because one day, you'll look back at the moments that broke you and whisper, thank you. Not because they were fair, but because they made you